Hi folks, this is Griffin from Oakland County Parks and Recreation. We missed you at our upcycled paper bead virtual program, and we're going to send out this recording to show you a little bit of what you missed and how to use that kit that you bought. Real quick though, we do have a couple of programs coming up. This Friday and Saturday at the Wind Nature Center, we have some free trail hikes. Those will be in person, just call in and register. And this Friday night, we also have another one of these Zoom crafting sessions on sustainable and reused wrapping. You can still purchase a kit. There are still some available, and pick that up either here at the Independence Oaks Contact Station or at the Red Oaks Nature Center. Coming up next year, we have a couple more of these virtual programs, as well as plenty of in-person hikes and programs like a pop-up snowman program in January, as well as some snowshoe and maple sugaring programs, and virtual crafting sessions like this. So keep an eye on our website, as well as our social media for more information on those. Now today, we're talking a little bit about paper beads, and we're going to be making some. But before we start, I'd just like to share with you guys a little bit about the history of beads and their importance globally. Our upcycled paper beads are nothing new. People have been making beads for thousands and thousands of years. The first beads that we have record of were made about 50,000 years ago by the precursor to modern humans, the Neanderthals. Now, a lot of people consider Neanderthals to just be brutes who are concerned with survival and finding food, but it turns out that they actually liked jewelry and makeup as well, and used teeth, shells, feathers, any kind of natural material to make beads. Now, about 10,000 years later, 40,000 years ago, modern humans, Homo sapiens, showed up. And since then, we've been making beads too. Cultures across the world, from the Native Americans to the peoples of Africa, the Celts, the Japanese, the Polynesian Islanders, pretty much everyone has made some kind of bead, either as a jewelry or for cultural purposes. Here you can see some examples of Native American beads up in the upper left, some Maasai beads from Africa in the lower left, some ancient Roman beads in the center, as well as some Celtic beads in the upper right, and some beautiful Egyptian beads down in the lower right. Now, all of these beads held some significance, whether that was for religious purposes. Think of something like a rosary or Buddhist prayer beads. They would have a bead and count those beads off with saying some kind of mantra or prayer, or just use these beads in religious ceremonies, like many Hindu ceremonies. Beads might also be used in different cultural events or important ceremonies. For instance, this purple and white wampum belt was made by a Mohawk tribe to mark a treaty. They used a specific combination of white and purple beads to mark this special event. And many events, especially in Iroquois territories, would have a wampum belt like this. Across the Atlantic Ocean in Africa, many tribes would have very special beadwork to mark certain occasions, like festivals, marriages, funerals, or anything like that. Another really important use of beads is in trade. So here we see some glass Venetian trade beads. These beads would have been used maybe to trade with African peoples, or, as legend has it, to buy the island of Manhattan from the Native Americans. The Venetians weren't the only people to use this. Native Americans, Africans, Asians, and pretty much anyone who had beads would use those as some kind of currency. And finally, beads were also used to symbolize someone's status or just for fashionable accessories. Now, beads can be made out of just about any material. Some common ones are things like shells, different kind of exotic woods, bones, antlers, or feathers, rocks, and gemstones, or synthetic materials like glass and plastic. Paper beads are not something that we just came up with here at the Nature Center. They've been around for actually hundreds of years also. Back in the 1800s, Victorian ladies would get together with their friends, and they would take strips of wallpaper wrap it around a knitting needle, and make beaded curtains for doorways. A couple of decades later in the 1920s and 30s, women rediscovered these paper beads and decided that they'd make smaller ones out of things like newsprint or magazines, sometimes soak them in perfume so they smelled nice, and just make jewelry out of them. Today, these paper beads are also an emerging industry in many African communities. The women in these communities will make beads out of recycled paper, and then they will sell those to get a little bit of extra income for their communities. If you look online, you can find a lot of these beads coming out of places like Uganda and Rwanda, and they're very, very beautiful. Now today, we're going to be making some paper beads because it's really super easy. It only takes a couple of materials, and more importantly, it's really fun to do. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, now we can take that bag that you picked up from either the Independence Oaks Contact Station or Red Oaks Nature Center, and we can take a look at what we have inside. So your kit should come with a wooden skewer like this, a glue stick like this one, 30 inches of black cord, a small tub of varnish, and then about 25 pieces of paper. And we will be using all of these materials to make our beads. Now, in your kit, you'll have 3 different shapes of paper. You'll have a long square piece like this, a long tapered piece like this, and a much shorter tapered piece like this. Now, these pieces might vary in size because they were all hand cut, but these 3 shapes will give you 3 different shapes of beads. To create our beads, we're going to take one of these pieces of paper and our dowel. We're going to put some glue stick on this. We're going to coat the back of the first part up to maybe about the halfway point with glue. You might want to put a piece of paper on your work surface so you don't get glue all over it. And once we have our glue on, we're going to slowly and carefully roll it up from the wide end all the way to the point. We're going to roll until we reach the end of where our glue stick is. Now we're going to put some more glue stick going up a little bit further. We don't want to go all the way to the tip yet, otherwise it'll dry out by the time we get there. Just keep rolling. And it's a good idea right at the end to put a little bit more glue on the tip so that it stays down. And that'll give us this nice tapered bead. You can pull it off our dowel once it dries a little bit. But while this one's drying, we can go ahead and use some more of this space to make some of our other beads. Like this small one. Now, all of the beads in this kit are going to look like this. They're going to have this color. But if you don't want a bead that's that color, you can simply just color on the back of it. So flip it over to the white side, and then using any kind of tool, crayons, markers, highlighters, whatever, you can just color the back. Whatever color you want. And this time, instead of rolling up with this side, you're going to want to flip it over and just repeat the exact same process. Put some glue on, roll it up slowly. Sometimes this can be a bit tricky if your paper doesn't want to cooperate, but with a little bit of patience, it should start rolling up really nicely. And that'll give you a nice bead in whatever color you chose. You can put different patterns on there like stripes or different colors and just go wild with it. Pretty much anything you do will probably look good on there, so don't be afraid to experiment. Now, once we have our beads all rolled up, we can take that cup of varnish and we can put this on to make the beads a little bit tougher, a little bit more waterproof, and make them last a little bit longer. Now, if you have a paintbrush or a sponge or other kind of applicator, that's great. It'll work perfect. If you don't, you can just get a little bit on your finger and just kind of rub it all over here, getting a nice even coat on. Once you have that even coat, it should look a little bit shiny all over, like that. When that dries, your bead is going to be much tougher and much more resistant to water than it was before. So once you have all of your beads, you should have about 25 in your kit. You can take your string and just start carefully putting those beads on. The hole should be a little bit larger than the thread, so you've got plenty of room to stick it on. If you're having a little bit of trouble getting the end of your thread through your bead, you can put a little bit of clear tape on the end, and that'll help it go through much easier. But when you have all of your beads on your necklace, you can choose whatever length you'd like it at, and just tie off the ends. You can take these two ends, make a loop around two fingers like this, and just take these two ends, poke them through this loop, like that, and pull tight. And that knot won't go anywhere when anyone pulls on it. And there you go. You have a beautiful paper bead necklace. Now, the things that we gave you in your kit are a good place to start with paper beads, but they're not the end. There's a lot of other really cool things you can do to make your own paper beads. One of these things is you can cut different sized pieces of paper to make a variety of different sizes of beads. That way you can have a necklace or a bracelet with a variety of large beads and small beads, so that you have a little bit of visual variety there, make it a little bit more interesting. Another thing you can do is to cut your pieces of paper a little bit differently, and that'll result in different shapes of beads also. In your kit, we gave you beads, we gave you papers to make the narrow barrel beads, as well as some square beads, but here we have a couple of other styles, and if you let your imagination go wild, you can come up with a bunch of different ones too. Another thing you can try is if you get some really long paper, like a magazine or a newspaper, you can cut up thin strips and make circular beads like this one, where it's almost perfectly round. You just want to make sure that you have a very long, very thin strip of paper for that kind. You can also try using different types or textures of paper. We used a bunch of flyers that we had laying around. We just recycled paper we had. But if you go to a craft store, you can find a whole bunch of different papers in all different colors, shapes, and textures. You can try those for your beads. Finally, you can always mix and match different colors and types of beads to make whatever jewelry you have in mind. Just let your imagination run wild with it, and you're bound to have a good time. So, thanks for watching this video. We're sorry you weren't able to make it to the virtual program today, but if you have any questions, so feel free to send us an email at natureeducation@oakgov.com, and we'll get back to you with the answer to any of your questions. Thanks for watching, and we hope we will see you soon.